Hello and welcome to Movie Night Tonight. This is the movie discussion podcast where every single week we watch a new film and discuss it in depth, with each month having a new theme. We are currently in our month of courtroom dramas, and the film we are discussing tonight is 1992's A Few Good Men. I'm your host, Nathanael Molnár. I'm joined by Rob Giachinta. Rob, thanks for being here with me.
Hey, anytime, man.
Yeah, I'm excited. We're gonna talk about this movie. It's a pretty decent movie, but I don't want to give my thoughts too early. So we are going to be talking about this movie in depth, full spoilers, as if you watched it with us. So how we're going to start is we're both going to give our first impressions and say roughly how many times we've seen the film, starting with you, Rob.
Okay, this is my first time watching the movie, and I got to say it was actually pretty engrossing, I have to say. I thought not to jump too quick into it, but out of courtroom drama, I thought this was, like, I would think of this more than I would think of the other movies when I think courtroom drama. And I thought this, I think I like this more than 12 Angry Men, but I thought this was better than Philadelphia, and it's a movie that I definitely would watch again because of just excellent performances by Tom Cruise and Demi Moore, and I thought Jack Nicholson was a little overrated, but I love him as well. So, yeah, definitely a good courtroom drama movie.
Yeah, definitely. So this is my second time, I believe, seeing this film, and I love it too. I think it's great. I think it's very, very, very well written by my favorite screenwriter in the business, Aaron Sorkin, which we'll talk a little bit more about him later in the show. Directed by Rob Reiner, who I really feel like Rob Reiner is a very underappreciated director.
Yeah, he definitely had his moment between like the 80s and 90s where he had like Stand By Me, this, Misery, Princess Bride, this is Spinal Tap, a bunch of other ones.
I feel like he very quietly made a whole bunch of films that we all kind of largely recognize.
When Harry Met Sally, too.
My favorite all-time romantic comedy. Love that movie. Probably my favorite Rob Reiner film.
The Bucket List.
That's a really good movie. That
wasn't bad.
I feel like Rob Reiner very quietly made like a bunch of movies that we all kind of widely regard as being some of the all-time greats. And yet, whenever we're talking about top directors, we never really mention Rob Reiner. Not to mention his production company and all the great films that they've done.
Yeah,
Castle Rock. So, so I love this movie. I think it's really good. I agree with you. I think if you're looking at the movies that we've watched and discussed this month, 12 Angry Men, Philadelphia, and now A Few Good Men, this is probably the most quintessential courtroom drama. It mostly happens like, not the first hour, but the second hour is mostly in the courtroom. That's really the entire focus of the film and the drama and everything that's happening. And in terms of what we've talked about with being sort of imperative to what courtroom dramas are, A Few Good Men definitely exemplifies that. And I think all the performances are great. I would say Jack Nicholson, I thought, was great in this movie. He doesn't have that much screen time, but I don't
understand how you're going to give him a nomination, but not Tom Cruise. I mean, Tom Cruise carries the whole movie pretty much, I thought.
Yeah, no, I
whatever.
Agree.
I mean, you get Nicholson, he's got that kind of street status where you give a good performance and you're shoo-in to get a nomination. I get it, but
yeah, I agree with you, and I think also a part of it is that he has very little screen time, but his presence is so strong throughout the film that the performance that he gives for the time he is on screen kind of carries him all the way through the movie. And there are some performances that are like that where they don't have as much screen time, but the kind of presence that they deliver for the time that they do have, like, really kind of weighs heavily on the film.
It's interesting to go over that category in the Oscars with supporting actor and how you can have a performance like Mahershala Ali in Green Book where that's a supporting character, but he's pretty much in the whole movie. And then you have a Jack Nicholson in this movie or an Anne Hathaway in Les Mis, and how different those they judge those acting and whatever.
Or Christian Bale in The Fighter where he's the main character.
Yeah, pretty. Yeah.
Yeah, no, supporting actor category and supporting actress category at the Oscars are very kind of nebulous in terms of, like, you can literally have 2 minutes and be a supporting actor,
Yeah.
or you can have like an hour and a half of screen time and be a supporting actor. It's one of those really interesting categories. Um, but let's dive into this film, and I want to start first with Aaron Sorkin. So I mentioned that he is my all-time favorite screenwriter, and it sounded like you agreed.
Oh, I agree. Too. I mean, there's definitely some guys up there too, but like just every script he writes, I find is like seamless and just
Mm,
like it's just totally realistic, and you never feel like you're like watching, or you never feel like whoever like wrote this doesn't know how humans speak. Like they're realistic situations he puts his characters in. I feel like.
definitely. And I feel like Sorkin's scripts always pack a punch. And it doesn't matter what the subject matter is, he can take
Mhm.
something that's rather minimal and make it so engrossing. And like he'll take like any of his scripts, whatever is going on, you will feel like everything hinges on this. And he makes everything feel important and he gives everything weight. And I can say from personal experience writing screenplays, uh, dialogue is really hard to do, and not just write dialogue, but to write convincing dialogue that sounds like people just talking normally, and not just that, but with Aaron Sorkin's scripts, it's characters talking a lot, talking fast, walking and talking. That is
Yeah.
most of his films is just heavy dialogue.
He doesn't write like Marvel movies. Like,
Yeah, no. No, he writes heavy
yeah,
dialogue throughout the entire film, and that is a special gift as a writer to be able to write that much dialogue in the film and to have the dialogue be as dynamic and engrossing as it is, and to say as much about the characters as it does. Like, that's something I've always felt with his scripts, is that the dialogue is always uniquely tailored to who the characters are. Like, I don't think you could really take lines not just related to A Few Good Men, but if you look at any of his films, I don't think you could take the dialogue from one character and give it to another character and have it feel right. The
hmm
dialogue is very uniquely written for the characters, and that just shows a level of proficiency as a writer, and I just think he's a brilliant screenwriter.
I agree.
So this was his first film that he wrote. It
hmm
was also based upon a play that he wrote. It was his first ever thing that he wrote, was to play A Few Good Men. It was funny. He wrote it. He had just graduated college, and he was working as a bartender at Broadway in New York. And so the shows would be going on, and as a bartender, he's working before the show. He's working at the intermission in the middle of the show. But that first act in between those two, he's just sitting there with nothing going on. So he's sitting there with cocktail napkins and writing out the entire play over the course of his time working there. Ends up writing out this whole play, and then he sits down and types it up. The play, A Few Good Men, opens in November of 1989, and the movie rights were sold even before it opened.
Oh
Now,
wow.
which is crazy to me because that's the first thing he's writing,
Yeah.
and he's an untested commodity. People don't know, is he a good writer, or what does he have, and it's already just like that sold.
What did he go to school for?
I don't know off the top of my head.
Like, was writing always like what he wanted to do, or like I don't.
So I
I don't know if
listened
you know.
to I don't know off the top of my head well enough to be able to speak about it. Um, I listened to a podcast. I think it was on Mark Maron's show, WTF. He I think Aaron Sorkin was on that show, and he went through all of like his childhood and his process, like how he got into writing. And I highly recommend it for people listening who are interested. Clearly, I mean, I was interested, but not enough to be able to retain most of it to be
Yeah,
able to talk
yeah, it's all right.
educatedly about it now. But it's a really interesting story. And he is one of those, like, started at the bottom, worked his way up, and now
Yeah,
he's not just a writer, he's a director too. He did
Molly's Game was awesome.
Molly's Game. That was like one of my that was in my top 5 favorite
Yeah,
movies of the year it came out.
I mean, bearing the apocalypse, as long as it still comes out this year, Trial Chicago 7. I can't wait for that.
Yeah, I can't wait for that too. Fantastic casts. And it's something where, and I really wish, I think we talked about this before, but I really wanted to be able to see his Broadway show of To Kill a Mockingbird.
I'm shocked they haven't like done a remake of that with his script or whatever.
It could be. I think the Broadway show was relatively new within the last couple of years. So I wouldn't be surprised if that happens.
I would love to, I mean, I know I haven't even seen the original, but I would be interested to see him, his production of it.
And Jeff Daniels as I'm forgetting the main character's name, but
Harper.
No, well, that's the author, Harper Lee. I'm forgetting the main character's name in the thing, but Jeff Daniels is fantastic for that. But and plus Harper Lee had a sequel book come out not too long ago. So and that was an adapted. I didn't read it, no, but I heard mixed things about it. But that's something where if they remade the Kill Mockingbird, they could very easily adapt that book as well. So it's ripe for the plucking. But yeah, so needless to say, Aaron Sorkin has a massive body of work. And so it is really interesting to go and watch this film and see kind of where it all began. Began with this passion project. First, it was the play, his first thing he ever wrote. And then it became his first screenplay that he ever wrote. And then it just kind of went off from there. He started at the bottom and worked his way up. And now he's a writer and a director and working with huge casts and some of the biggest names in Hollywood. It's really like one of those inspiring stories.
Has he won an Academy Award?
Yes, he won one Academy Award. I don't know off the top of my head. Maybe
I bet it was for The Social Network.
That's my guess.
That's probably my favorite script of his, I'd say.
Yeah, that's a really good script. Yeah. Aaron Sorkin's such a great writer. And with this movie, I have a couple of thoughts about it. I would hope so if we're going to do a full discussion of it. But so here's my thoughts. I'm curious what you think about this. So this didn't strike me as much the first time that I watched the film. The second time, this time that I was watching it, this kind of hit me more. I kind of felt that the first hour of the movie was a little bit dry. It just kind of felt like it wasn't until the case started to kind of speed up and they were preparing for the case and then they got into the courtroom and everything in that second hour until the very end of the film, when they're in the courtroom, that was all edge of my seat, like completely riveted the entire time. But that first hour, while it has really good points, it is a little bit dry. And I don't know, that was something that I kind of was just feeling like it felt like it was taking a little bit too long to get where it's going. And while dialogue is definitely Aaron Sorkin's strength, there were parts of that first hour that just kind of felt like it was just too much talking and too much going on before we were actually getting to the actual substance of what's actually happening. And that's not to say that I didn't like the first hour. I just felt like after we got through that first hour, once we got into the second part of the film, that's when it really picked up and became this great movie that I feel A Few Good Men is.
I'd kind of agree. I felt like, at least when I started watching it, like I didn't really understand where this was all heading to or where it was going. But I mean, I think once like Tom Cruise and Demi Moore and Kevin Pollak all started like that first like montage sequence where like they all were working on the case, I'd say that's where the movie picked up for me personally, and
that's the exact spot that I feel the same way. That's the exact spot where it really took its turn. Mm-hmm. And again, it's not to say that the first hour isn't entertaining or isn't. No, and it's one of those things. Like I always say with slow burns films, and this is a slow burn movie. I think personally, maybe not to the same degree as something like Alien, but it's all about where you're going. And so even if the beginning is slower and it's slowly building up, once you get to that end point, it's all kind of worth it. And I feel like A Few Good Men is definitely like that. Like the first hour might be a little bit slower, a little bit more dry. You don't really see exactly where it's going. But then by the time you get to the end, by the time Jack Nicholson, as the witness, says, "You're goddamn right, I did." Once you get to that point, you know it's all been worth it.
Yeah. I was shocked he actually, well, I mean, I've never seen the movie. I was shocked he actually said it and gave in.
Well, and I think they set that up really well in the very beginning, that
Yep.
Demi Moore is saying, or I think actually Tom Cruise is saying, he's like, he wants to say it because he doesn't think he did anything wrong. And
That's
he's
true.
so sick and frustrated with the fact that people are thinking what he did was wrong because he did what he thought was right. And he's just dying to say it. And they set that up really well, I thought. And then it obviously paid off, and Tom Cruise was able to get him right in position where
Yeah.
he kind of let that loose. And I love that whole interaction between Tom Cruise and Jack Nicholson is just fantastic.
That was the best part of the movie, I thought.
Yeah. I didn't realize this until I started looking up the movie in preparation for this show. But the famous line, the line that everybody knows, even if you've never seen A Few Good Men, you know the line to, "You can't handle the truth." That line was written by Steven Spielberg.
Oh, really?
I guess he did some of the, he helped out with some of the dialogue in the film. And that was one of the lines that he came up with. And it's funny that sort of huge line that everybody knows, even if you don't know this movie, was written by Steven Spielberg, who really, other than that, had nothing to do with this film.
No, that's funny.
I think that just kind of shows Spielberg's influence in this industry, that he is the person you call and you talk to. If you have ideas, if you have questions, he's just kind of has his fingers in everybody's pie.
Yeah.
So one of the things we've been talking about this month with Courtroom Dramas, we talked about it with 12 Angry Men. We talked about it with Philadelphia. One of the things that we kind of defined this genre as was sort of showing the idealized notion of truth, justice, and fairness, and how in reality, in law, in the courtrooms, how that we often fall short of that. We don't often find true justice. The system is set up in a way that it should work in a certain way, but often we find that system doesn't actually work the way it's supposed to work. And we definitely saw it in 12 Angry Men. We definitely saw it in Philadelphia. Maybe more so 12 Angry Men than Philadelphia. But I think in this movie, that is at the forefront of this film. It's at its center, really, is that idea. And I think truth, especially, is a big part of this film, is that search for the truth. And I think one of the ways that they kind of capture this and kind of delve into this notion is through the challenging of authority figures. Because you have, as a big portion of this film, you have this idea that, and this is sort of reinforced just by the military structure that's presented in the film, that you have, these are the top people, and you do not question what these people say. If they are saying it, then it must be the right thing to do. It must be the good thing to do. And you just accept it and take it as fact and truth, regardless of how you personally feel about it. And then you kind of have Tom Cruise and Demi Moore coming in and starting to pull that apart and saying, well, let's challenge these people and kind of get at the root of what they're saying and why they're saying it and what sort of ulterior motives there are. I think in general, there is a lot of pushback for challenging people in positions of authority. I think and I think maybe it's just the way that a lot of people are raised and taught, not just in any one area, across the entire planet, are kind of raised and taught to, these are the authority figures, you respect them, and you just kind of accept what they say, and you just take that, and you're respectful to them. And then there are other people, and I think this movie is very much in line with that, is, well, let's actually take a look at what they're saying and not just accept it because they are in a position of authority. Let's actually challenge them and hold them accountable when they need to be held accountable. And that was one of the things that I thought this movie did really well.
Yeah, I think it relates to real life too, and like if we don't challenge the people that are putting out these ideas and all these philosophies, then how can we ever change for the better as a society?
Yeah,
Mhm.
because just because someone is in a position of authority doesn't mean that they know best.
Yeah, just because they told us cigarettes were fine for you, were we not supposed to scientifically
Yeah,
prove that they were bad for you, or all sorts of things like that?
yeah, exactly. Um, or like World War One, a war that did not need that happen, and then everyone's saying, let's go into war, let's go into war, and then suddenly this giant war, the First World War, happens for literally no reason whatsoever. So, I mean, you just see that across history, or even take World War Two with
Yeah.
Hitler, and people just kind of like, well, he's the president of Germany because Hitler was elected president of Germany. Um, he's the president of Germany. Let's just listen to what he says and do what he says. And next thing you know, you have the Holocaust.
Yeah.
So you definitely see that. And I think there are extreme measures like Hitler and the Holocaust, but then you
Yeah.
have something smaller like a person who has a high ranking in the military ordering a code red and then trying to cover his own ass when it falls out of line. And you see that with this film. And this is kind of like prime example of you have all these things, like especially when they get into the doctor and how there was the possibility that Santiago had I forget exactly what they were saying,
Like
but
a chemical imbalance or
yeah, something along those lines where he probably should not have actually been there, but the doctor just kind of gave him a clean bill of health and sent him out. And then once there started to be problems, they had to cover all their tracks and start covering everything up. Going back to the idea of challenging authority figures, I think one of the things that this movie does a really interesting job of is looking at that, but also through the lens of military and military life. In that the movie sort of takes a painstaking amount of time to really set up and reinforce this sort of culture and structure within the military of you have your superiors and you have the inferiors, and everyone who's inferior to the superior listens to them, does whatever they say. And a big part of the case is they do not inject their own morality into the situation. If the superior tells you to do something, it doesn't matter if you think it's right or if it's wrong, you just do it. And I think the movie, almost in a way, is sort of dissecting this and saying, well, is this really the best way for things to be structured where people are not enacting their own sense of morality and sense of compassion? Because you have someone like Jack Nicholson's character, who is the very, 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 very top. Earlier part in the film, in a rather crude way, he sort of says that he's just below the president in terms of hierarchy. Um, so you have someone who's at the very, 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 very top of this, who is sort of kind of just is able to work the system because he knows nobody is going to not follow his directions. And then something like this can happen. Santiago would still be alive if people were exercising their own sense of morality and sort of saying, well, okay, my superior is saying this, but is this really the right thing to do? And I love that at the very end. I forget the name of the defendant who says it, but he essentially says at the end that we didn't do our job because we were supposed to be looking out for the weak. We were supposed to be looking out for the little people, and we didn't do that.
yeah. But at the same time, I mean, I completely understand why they did do it, because if they didn't do it, it probably would have just happened to them.
Yeah.
So I don't know how I necessarily felt about how they were dishonorably discharged,
Mm-hmm.
because in the end, like they did what they were told by an officer that was, elected in that military system. And
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't know if a police officer told you to, like, pretty much had you at gunpoint, told you to kill somebody, like, is that on you or is that on them? I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. And I feel like it is one of those, like, damned if you do, damned if you don't,
Yeah.
because they follow orders and they're dishonorably discharged. If they hadn't followed orders, they would have been dishonorably discharged, or even worse. I
they
think,
would have got the what was it, the red code red to them
yeah.
probably.
And so it's one of those things where the people who are higher up are just kind of saying, well, we can do what we want. And then once it's time for the blame will fall on the people that we're having carry it out. And we can tell them to do this, or we'll tell them what we want them to do. And if they don't do it, they're screwed. And if they do it, they're screwed. Regardless, it doesn't fall on us. We keep our hands clean. And the great satisfying thing about the end of this film is that Jack Nicholson's hands weren't clean. He admitted to it in court, and then he actually got what he deserved and was arrested.
Although I do like how they give, like Jack Nicholson isn't just some like jerk or an asshole. He actually kind of, I mean, at least like you said, like he thinks he's in the right here.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually, to some degree, kind of understand where he's coming from, in which, he has to make sure that all the members of his, patrol or whatever are like at the top of their game, and that they're defending our country, because that's what he was put there to do. But unfortunately, I think he just took it to a inhumane and too far of a way, in which, he kind of went above his power.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And that is a great thing about the script of this, is that he isn't a one-dimensional mustache twirling villain. He really does believe the best villains are the ones who think they're doing the right thing. And
Thanos.
and he's exactly that. He thinks that he is in the right. And I really like that speech that he has at the end of the film. He's like, you know what? You may hate me. You may think that I am this monster or I'm the worst, but you know what? Because of what I did, and I have to do what I have to do to keep people safe. You may hate me for it, but that's what needed to happen. And maybe to some degree he is right, but also on the other hand, there is a system in place of checks and balances, and when one person goes beyond that, there should be accountability. There isn't always accountability, but then sometimes there is when there should be. And this was one of those cases.
And I like how he said, like, even if I had like a second chance of this, I would just do the same thing again.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree. It's a very well done film in terms of all that. And I love, like, so there's so many different layers of different things going on. You sort of have this dissection of the military structure, but also just an authority structure in general. You have this sort of challenging of authority figures. You have this courtroom drama element about this passionate search for the truth, and how at all points, even our main characters are saying at certain times, you know what? It doesn't really matter what the truth is. We just want to take the easy road. Tom Cruise does that multiple times where he's like, we'll just give him the 6 months. We'll make the deal. We'll get him the 6 months. Yeah. We can't possibly win this case. Let's just throw our hat in now. Even the main characters, who ultimately, because they stuck with it, they get the truth, the thing that they cannot handle. Even them, at many points throughout the film, are just saying, let's let it go. Because, and I think this is something that the film communicates, it is very easy to just let the lies and distorted truths and false facts kind of just stay where they are. What's the hard thing to do is to really dig in and find the truth. Because the truth is something, and Jack Nicholson is very right, or Steven Spielberg, who wrote the line, a lot of people can't handle the truth. A lot of people are very comfortable with the non-truth. And sometimes it's more comfortable for people to just kind of let what is easy for them and more comfortable for them be what is true, rather than the actual hard, cold facts.
Yeah, because they could have, I mean, the truth takes hard work. And, I mean, you could be lazy and not do the hard work, and they could have just did the 6 months. But, Tom Cruise, he had something to prove, I think, to, the people that are working for him, and also to himself, to, live up to the expectations of, his dad, who is this, big time lawyer and all this jazz. And I think he did a good job of it.
Yeah, that was a really interesting angle of the film, because it kind of gave Tom Cruise's character, as much as he was competing with the government with Kevin Bacon's character. And as much as there was the conflict there, and he sort of had the conflict with Demi Moore's character, there was this sort of sense of competition that was brought about just with the connection to his father, that we had an understanding of why he kind of acts the way that he acts. Why is he driven? What is compelling him to do this? And part of it is that he wants to actually find the truth, and he wants to solve this case, and he wants to further his law practice. But on the other hand, part of it is just that he is trying to prove something to his father, and that is driving him and giving him reason to do what he's doing. And I thought that was a very interesting angle.
For something that like most movies that are based off of plays, they usually like, I feel like they're like smaller movies set in like one or two locations. I thought this, like, if you hadn't told me it was a play before, I wouldn't have known necessarily, because it just how it like takes place and all these like different, it felt bigger than a play to me. I thought.
Yeah, that's very true. I think part of that might be that they just kind of expanded upon what they were able to do in terms of the adaptation.
Yeah.
But if you, like, I would agree that if you had not told me that this was a play ahead of time, I wouldn't have guessed it on my own. But looking back on it, knowing that it was a play, I can see how it was a play, because really you would just need a couple of locations, or one location rather, for the actual military base. You would need Tom Cruise's apartment, and you would need the courtroom. So I can see now how it was a play, but you're exactly right. It's one of those things where it feels larger and bigger than a play. Like it's kind of like 12 Angry Men, another originally a play and then adapted into the film.
Yeah.
That you can very much see was a play, because it all literally took place in one room.
Or fences or something like that.
Yeah. But this one was definitely adapted more, and I think for the better. Like, It was good to get beyond the restrictions of it just being a play. So this is our final film for our month of courtroom dramas. And so we kind of talked a little bit about 12 Angry Men. We've talked a little bit about Philadelphia. I just wanted to talk real quick about, now that we've done this month, what are some things now that we've kind of taken away from these movies, from courtroom dramas? Because I know these are 3 films that you saw for the first time this month, correct? So,
no, I'd seen 12 Angry Men.
Oh, yes, that's right. So at least Philadelphia and A Few Good Men were new movies for you. And Philadelphia was a new movie for me. I hadn't seen that one before. So now that we've seen these 3 films, what are sort of the takeaways you have for courtroom dramas in general? And if you had to kind of compare or contrast or rank the 3 films, how would you do that?
I would say the way these films are similar, I feel like they all have a main or lead character who, wants to find the truth in something that necessarily isn't right in front of them. But if they actually, talk it out and work it out, that they can find the truth. With, you have that with Denzel Washington's character who, he thinks there's truth behind that story. And then there's the Henry Fonda in 12 Angry Men who, wants to talk things out and find the truth. And then you have Tom Cruise who wants to, figure things out and go deeper into the story and figure out what's the truth. And if I had to say, I'd say this was the best courtroom drama movie. I wouldn't say I think 12 Angry Men is the better movie overall, but I'd say this one and Philadelphia were the better courtroom dramas, while I thought 12 Angry Men was more of just a drama, to be completely honest with you.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. So I completely agree with everything you were just saying. For me, if I were to rank them, I think 12 Angry Men would be like way up there. I think I love that movie. That's probably in like a top 30 all-time favorite films for me. Philadelphia and A Few Good Men are neck and neck. I think that the second hour of A Few Good Men is better than any part of Philadelphia, but I thought Philadelphia was a little more consistent. So I would probably give the edge to A Few Good Men.
I couldn't see myself wanting to watch Philadelphia really ever again. Not that it was a bad movie. I think I've gotten what I needed to get from it. This movie, in a couple of years, I would want to watch.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I would agree that I think the biggest thing, because we did set up at the beginning of the month the idealized notion of truth, justice, and fairness, and how often that's doesn't meet that point that we're always searching for. And I think that we found with these three movies, more than fairness and justice, truth was the one that most characters were seeking. Because and you hear it a lot in this film, but I mean, it's true in any courtroom. When the witness is swearing in, they say, "Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?" And even then, there are a lot of people lying. So truth is one of those very rare things that it's so hard to find what's true, because truth is a very individual thing. It goes back to the classic thing of, if a tree falls in the woods, did it ever make a noise? Like, if something happens but it only happened to one person, and then that person sort of distorts what that was to them, then suddenly this fundamental fact is forever changed. And truth is so hard to kind of lock down, because there are so many people who distort things in their head, and it's not an intentional thing. Sometimes it is, but it's not always an intentional thing, where it's just something our brains do, that a truth becomes a memory, and memories become distorted, and then over time what was actually truth is lost for so many people. And truth is just such a hard thing to really lock down and find. And so I think with these three films, what we saw was a very noble attempt to find what was the truth. And I think A Few Good Men, even though technically, since this came out in 92, Philadelphia was 93, we should have watched this one before Philadelphia. I think this was a good one to end the month on, because I think it really summed up in the whole, what is the truth? I think I'm entitled. You can't handle the truth. That part specifically, but also just the film as a whole. This whole idea that we've kind of been looking at and discussing this whole month.
Yeah. And whether we like it or not, we all have our own truth, I feel like, when it comes, and then, sometimes that can get in the way of what's right.
Yeah. And we all have our own biases that kind of impact and influence what our truth is, or our perception of the truth. So, so I think I'm going to lock down. I'm going to say 12 Angry Men at 1, A Few Good Men at 2, Philadelphia, while it's very close, Philadelphia at 3.
Yeah, if we're just going by quality of films, that's my list too.
Yeah, but I agree. If we're looking for the quintessential courtroom drama, I would agree with A Few Good Men. But I feel like this has been a pretty solid month in terms of films. It's been a little bit.
We never really ever try to pick bad movies. The only time we don't necessarily like the movies if we hadn't seen it before, usually.
Yeah. But yeah, it was a decent, cohesive month.
Yeah, it's not like we picked, let's watch The Judge. I bet it'll be awesome.
Yeah, no, I think we could skip that one. So let's go into our final thoughts on A Few Good Men. Starting with you, Rob. What are your final thoughts on the film?
This is one of my more memorable Tom Cruise performances. I thought he was really good in the movie, and it's just an entertaining movie to kind of just, I don't know, after watching it, you kind of feel like you know a little bit more about the legal system and just how a courtroom works. I mean, a lot of people, like myself, have never been in a courtroom, and I thought this did a good job of putting you in one. And I'd give it a 4.1 out of 5. Nice.
And prior to the third act, Tom Cruise's character hadn't been in a courtroom either. Yeah. So my final thoughts are, I think this is a really, really good movie. I think it's very well written, a great example of Aaron Sorkin's writing, and I think he only improved as he went forward. But it's one of those things where if you find a writer who you really like, and you go back to the first thing that they wrote, a lot of times that's going to be complete shit. For this to be the first thing that Aaron Sorkin wrote, it's a fantastic screenplay. Very great direction by Rob Reiner. All the performances are fantastic. The first hour is a little bit dry compared to how intense and fantastic the second hour and into the rest of the film is. But overall, it's a really good movie. If I'm going to give it a score, I'd probably go with a 4.3 out of 5. So that has been our discussion of A Few Good Men from 1992, and that also concludes our month of courtroom dramas. So the next movie night tonight, we will be kicking off a brand new month, a brand new theme, and I'm happy to say that the theme that we will be discussing for next month will be survival films, and the first movie we're going to discuss is Castaway. I love that movie. Have you seen Castaway? I forget.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a good movie.
I love that
Well,
movie.
we just gave it away.
Yeah. What? So we'll
hey, you could cut it out technically.
Technically. Yeah, maybe I won't. But so you'll have to tune in for the next episode of Movie Night tonight to hear our full thoughts on Castaway. But all you'll know is that Rob thinks it's a good movie. So once again, I'm Nathanael Molnár. I'd like to thank Rob Giachinta for being here. Thanks for being here.
No problem.
Make sure to like, make sure to comment, make sure to subscribe. Do subscribe. Movie Night Tonight now is on its own YouTube channel. So you're probably listening. If you're listening to this on YouTube, you're listening to it on its channel. If you're listening to it on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, you can go over to the YouTube channel for Movie Night Tonight and subscribe to it. We have the whole backlog. All 3 seasons of Movie Night Tonight are now up on its own channel. So you can check that out there. And we are also on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, so you can listen to everything on there and follow us on all of our social medias at Movie Night TNT. So until our discussion of Castaway next week, thanks for listening.